Yeah, it just didn't work out. So
It's above the rim. You know what I mean? Sometimes
guys are as needed as in the past.
huge. I mean, you got to target
In the past.
team for sure. I mean, you got to target that big.
Let's do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indie Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had an awesome weekend. I know I did, between the Colts draft, Indiana Pacers. Played 2 games over the weekend, dropped game 3, won game 4 last night, though. But we have to start with the Indianapolis Colts and everything that they did in this year's NFL draft. And believe it or not, there were more players eligible to be drafted than just Shedeur Sanders. I don't know if you watched the ESPN coverage at all or not, but brutal, tough weekend for Mel Kiper Jr. But the Colts wound up drafting Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State, on Thursday. We talked about that quite a bit on Friday. So over the weekend, they addressed some other needs. They took an edge, JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State, cornerback Justin Wally out of Minnesota in the 3rd, Jalen Travis, offensive tackle, also out of Minnesota in the 4th, DJ Giddens out of Kansas State, a running back in the 5th, Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, Tim Smith from Alabama, defensive tackle, and then safety Hunter Wohler there in the 7th. So a lot of guys were drafted, and I didn't mind the draft. I thought that they, did a good job of addressing needs that they had while also getting a little bit of talent. But we already know what Chris Ballard thought. He loves this draft. He loves this draft. He thought that they got lucky. Here is Colts GM Chris Ballard talking about this whole draft class.
But I was trying to figure out, okay, there's certain things we wanted to get done, and we had to be able to move back and get a little luck, which we were able to. But all productive, all really mature players and men with an element of toughness and maturity that we wanted to add. So excited about that.
He's excited about this class. They added toughness and maturity. And I actually do think that they added a little bit of maturity, which is important because they've, failed to do that in some recent draft classes. But obviously the headliner of the Colts draft class this year is Tyler Warren. We're going to have Kevin Potts on the show coming up at 11 o'clock to talk about Tyler Warren and the rest of this Colts draft class, as well as some of the other storylines coming out of the draft. But Tyler Warren's probably 95% of Colts fans' favorite pick this year. This is the guy that every person that is a fan of the Colts has been pounding the table for them to draft from the moment that you found out that he could be drafted. And he's probably Shane Steichen's favorite pick too, because this guy is a legitimate weapon that they're going to be able to use in every facet of their offense. He can put his hand in the dirt. He can block in the run game. And obviously, we all know what he can do as a pass catcher and after the catch. Here is Colts head coach Shane Steichen talking about Tyler Warren and what he brings to this offense.
He's a guy, that can do it all. I mean, you guys know that. He can catch, he can run, he can throw. I mean, we might play him on defense. I don't know. The thing that's crazy, they talk about the Riggins, him growing up watching him. I mean, that's how he freaking plays. When he's got the ball in his hands, this guy is physical, run after catch. He'll lay the wood on you. He'll hurt you. It's going to bring a lot to our football team for sure. I mean, you got a target that big with that size. He plays above the rim. You know what I mean? Sometimes when guys are on him, he's still open. I mean, I know when we were at the Chargers, just an example. I'm not saying we're here yet, but we had a Gates rule. It was like, hey, you got him one-on-one, you throw him the dang ball. So obviously it'll be exciting to, see when he gets in here and see him compete. It'll be fun.
Shane Steichen right there talking about his new weapon in tight end, Tyler Warren, and everything that he's going to bring to the table. And I think Shane Steichen put it pretty well right there. He's a big dude. He can run. He can make plays after the catch. He's he plays above the rim, which I think is a really good analogy. Here in the great city of Indianapolis, we love basketball analogies with our football. We also like guys who can dunk and do all that good stuff. So I think that Shane Steichen is going to have a lot of fun with him. He had a lot of success in Philadelphia with the tight ends there. He had a lot of success with the Chargers with the tight ends that they had there as well. And I know we're all very excited to see what Tyler Warren looks like in that Indianapolis Colts jersey. What about the other guys? What about the other picks? Who else did they take? And I'm very excited to see what JT Tuimoloau looks like. Dominant edge, dominant pass rusher coming out of Ohio State. It's so funny. Jack Sawyer, the other edge rusher who was drafted in the 5th round, if I remember correctly, who also came out of Ohio State, he was talked about significantly more than JT was. Even though JT Tuimoloau was their best pass rusher, he led them in sacks with 12.5 on the season. By the way, he had 6.5 sacks in the 4 playoff games that they played in. That's kind of crazy. He also led all Ohio State Buckeye defensive linemen in tackles with 61. After the pick was made, good friend of the show, Zach Gray, shot me a text. He's a huge Ohio State fan and just said, you got Cam Hayward 2.0. Cam Hayward's had a pretty stellar career for the Steelers. I don't know if I'm ready to say that JT, Tuimoloau is going to be a Hall of Famer before he ever plays it down, but that's high praise. I like the energy, but here's why I like the pick. The NFL is a copycat league. Teams look around the NFL. They see what other offenses are running. They see how defenses are trying to combat these new offenses, and then every team just copies it. They copy it, and then they paste it into their own offensive and defensive schemes. That is how the evolution of the NFL happens. And it happens every so slightly every year because teams' offenses, they change every year. Because obviously, if you run the same offense that you ran last year, teams pick up on that, and then it's easier to adjust to, so you have to throw in these different wrinkles every single year. I don't feel like this happens in the draft, though. Teams don't sit back and say they draft this way and they win a lot of games, so we're also going to draft that way. I don't think teams do that. Now, obviously, as offenses and defenses change, that influences the draft picks that you make. For example, as the running athletic quarterback has become, more and more in style, we're seeing running athletic quarterbacks be drafted higher and higher in the first round. Like Lamar Jackson was a first-round pick, but if he'd been drafted 20 years sooner, he probably wouldn't have been a first-round pick because NFL teams wanted guys who could stand in the pocket and win from the pocket, right? Like they didn't want these guys who could ad-lib and run around, right? He still would have been drafted because he's Lamar Jackson and he's a stud, but he would have been taken later. So as the NFL's offenses and defenses change, the players that are taken change, but I don't think it's a copycat draft the way that it is in terms of how teams run their offenses and defenses. Personally, I think every team should just do what the Philadelphia Eagles do. They just take great players from great programs that produced at a high level. That is the blueprint for the Eagles, and we saw them do it again in this draft class. They went and they took Jahad Campbell with that 31st pick. Okay, they found a lot of success. When was the last time the Eagles were bad? Couldn't tell you. It's been a minute. And the Colts taking JT Tuimoloau, it just feels like a pick that the Philadelphia Eagles would make. JT's a dude who had a ton of production at a big-time school that expects to win. If I have an option between two guys that are the exact same in terms of like talent and physicality and they test the same and all that kind of stuff, and I have the option of taking the guy from Ohio State who's won a national title, has played with and against other great players, has gone against Josh Simmons, who was, a first-round draft pick of the Kansas City Chiefs, who plays offensive tackle. If I can take that guy, or I can take the defensive lineman from South Carolina, who went like 8-4 or whatever, or I guess they went 9-3 this last year. If I had the option, give me the guy who played at Ohio State, because there's just something about having that pedigree that makes you more likely to succeed. The thing that I really like about this pick is they drafted a guy that's used to winning. Everyone in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, Professional Cricket League, whatever, every guy wants to win. It's just true. Every player in every sport wants to win. But there's a difference when you expect to win. When you expect to win, losing bothers you a little bit more. People that are numb to losing, like, could you imagine like playing for the Browns for the past 10 years like Myles Garrett has? Like when that team loses, he's probably just like, another day in the office. People that are numb to losing are surprised when they win. And I don't want for the Colts, IU, the Pacers, Purdue, anyone really. I don't want anyone on any of those teams that we cover here on Indy Sports Ticket to be numb to losing, because guys that are numb to losing tend to not get better, and they sometimes lack the drive to improve, because what does it matter? Their team sucks, and they're going to lose anyway. Players that expect to win, though, like JT Tuimoloau, are the kind of players that you want. That's why you draft players from winning programs. This Colts team is filled with guys, because every guy on this team is now a Chris Ballard draft pick. It's filled with guys who haven't won anything in the NFL. It's filled with guys who haven't won the division in the last 9 years. It's filled with guys who are used to going 8-9, 9-8, and then going home and watching the playoffs from their couch. And I think one of the best ways to fix that is to bring in guys who have won and who expect to win. I like that Tim Smith, a defensive tackle from Alabama, I like that he played at Alabama and he won a bunch of games and he won a national title at some point. I like that Riley Leonard won a lot of games at Notre Dame and that he played for a national championship, even if I don't like Riley Leonard prospect. You need players in your building that expect to win. Cam Bynum, coming over from the Vikings, he won 14 games last year. You really think he's going to show up and be like, yeah, I'm pretty cool with winning 9 games this year? Absolutely not. Charvarius Ward played in the Super Bowl twice during his time with the 49ers. These are two guys who expect to win. And I feel like there was an emphasis on that in this draft for the Colts. They got some guys, not all of them, but they picked up multiple players who expect to win because they won a lot in college. And I'm actually kind of bullish on this Tim Smith defensive tackle out of Alabama. First, look, I told you before the draft, they were going to add some sort of guy at defensive tackle because Grover Stewart's, past the age of 30. So is DeForest Buckner. If you play at Alabama, it means that you're talented. No way around it. Here is Chris Ballard talking about Tim Smith, the Indianapolis Colts' newest defensive tackle.
Yeah, so we think he can play the 1 and the 3. One of the good things was our coaches had him at the Senior Bowl. So they got a live exposure to one, coaching him, for the entire week, and then kind of the personality, who he was, and then what his talent level was. And so we're excited to get him. I mean, I could feel our defensive staff around the 5th round start circling, and because they were pretty driven to get Tim as we were. So we think he's got a lot of upside.
Chris Ballard, Colts GM, right there, talking about taking Tim Smith in the 6th round. Big old defensive tackle out of Alabama. I like this pick. I like what Chris Ballard said. Maybe I'm falling for it. I don't want to fall for it. That's not good. I think that you can fake who you are for an interview or two, unless you're Shooter Sanders. But I think it's hard to do it for a full week of practice. And I think that the Colts have learned from their Anthony Richardson and A.D. Mitchell mistakes of taking guys that maybe aren't super mature. And I think that when you get to spend a week with a guy in practice, you get a pretty good feel for who that guy is. So I like this pick. Hopefully he's got the talent to back it up. With that being said, he's a 6th round pick. If he's a career backup for the Colts, then that's a good pick. Okay. Overall, the Colts draft, I thought it was solid. They got a guy in Tyler Warren who's a big talent and addressed a need. They also addressed other needs throughout the draft: edge rusher, defensive tackle. They added another corner. They brought in a safety. So on paper, this appears to be a good draft. No one knows, though. No one. I keep seeing that people think that the Colts reached on Justin Wally, their 3rd round pick, a cornerback out of Minnesota. How do you know? Because crybaby Mel Kiper Jr. said so? Come on now. We're going to find out here in a few weeks whether or not these guys can play at training camp. It's not hard to tell. When you have elite level athletes on the field, and every player that plays legitimate time in the NFL is an elite athlete, you can tell pretty quickly who is not on the same level. At the end of the day, I thought that the Colts addressed their needs. They added a guy in Tyler Warren who's hopefully going to be an impact player from the jump. They added a guy in JT Iamaleava, the edge rusher out of Ohio State. I'm not saying that guy's name for the next 2 hours. I'm sorry. I can't do it. Hopefully he's able to show up and have some sort of impact, whether that's, just a 3rd down pass rusher. We'll kind of see what he ends up looking like. But, and then the rest of the guys from the 3rd round on, I'm just not convinced that they're going to play a ton this year unless guys get hurt. I like this draft, though. I do. And part of it is because I noticed something new that the Colts did. They haven't done this previously, and I like it. I'll tell you what it is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe watch it on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. Maybe you're listening via the Indy Sports Ticket app that you can download wherever you find your apps. And if you want more from me, you can also check out the My Take Is YouTube channel. You should also check out Indulge Indy. Mother's Day coming up. I have a great gift idea for you. It's only $45. If you're looking to have fun, to drink, to eat, socialize, Indulge Indy is for you. Come out to the Ritz Charles in Carmel on Saturday, May 10th, to have endless samples of wine, spirits, and ready-to-drink cocktails, and sample nice little charcuterie board type foods and chocolates. I promise your wife, girlfriend, whoever will absolutely love it. Once again, only $45 a ticket. Text Indulge to 317-228-1430 to get a bounce back to buy tickets. I'm telling you, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be an absolute blast. Once again, Indulge Indy in Carmel. Now, the Colts, I noticed a slight adjustment in a draft philosophy of the Indianapolis Colts. Okay? Now, every team has different philosophies on how they want to draft. The Colts want horseshoe guys. They clearly value athletes as well. I noticed that in this draft class, and maybe this is just a coincidence, we will monitor this next year in the NFL draft to see if this continues to be a thing or not. Every single player that the Indianapolis Colts drafted either transferred up or they didn't transfer at all. I think that was on purpose. And I like that. I think that's a good thing. I like the idea of taking players that are loyal, okay with waiting their turn, and are okay with working while waiting their turn. Because unless you're a first-round pick or a second-round pick, pretty common to have to wait your turn in the NFL. Simple as that. If you're not a first or second-round pick, you're probably not starting week 1 of your rookie season. And guess what? Even if you are a first-round pick or a second-round pick, sometimes you don't start week 1. A.D. Mitchell, second-round pick last year, didn't start week 1, barely played. And speaking of A.D. Mitchell, I think this is now what I'm going to call the Colts A.D. Mitchell rule. A guy who transferred, shows up, doesn't get to play. It's not good. Wasn't good. He showed up to first day of training camp. They're like, hey, AD, you have to learn how to play special teams because, decent chance that we're going to need you as like a gunner. And AD was, this is all made up, by the way. AD was like, nah, I'm good. AD Mitchell got playing time at Georgia his freshman and sophomore year. Then he transferred to Texas, played there 1 year, entered the draft, and he got drafted. And it didn't go well for him last year. He was upset that he got drafted in the second round. You remember him getting on that, Zoom after the draft saying, I'm mad. He didn't mind throwing a game-changing pick 6 against the Denver Broncos because he, quote, did his job. I think people overreact to things all the time. It's like one thing goes wrong and, the world is all of a sudden falling apart. I think that the Colts are overreacting to this a little bit because I don't think that every player who transfers, down or somewhere else so they can play, I don't think all those guys are necessarily bad or bad dudes. But I do think that the Colts are changing this philosophy due to their experience with A.D. Mitchell last year. He didn't play a lot. Based on what we know about him, I don't think he handled that very well. And the guy who, didn't transfer, waited his turn or had to work his way up to get to that Power 4 level of college football would probably be more understanding and a little more acceptant and a little more willing to work if he doesn't start immediately in the NFL. So I think this is a slight shift in the way the Colts are going to draft players, and I am 1,000% entirely here for it. You can't have entitled guys in your locker room, especially if they're not going to play. If you show up and you expect to play, which, everyone should expect to play. That way, it's just a mentality thing. But the guys who don't, they have to respond properly. And I'd be willing to bet that Adonai Mitchell did not respond properly. Say what you want about Anthony Richardson and his struggles last season. But when he got benched, it seems that he responded in the right way. He answered questions in a very professional manner. He started showing up to work early, doing extra work in the film room. That is the proper response that you want. So, new Colts draft philosophy for you. The one thing that the Colts didn't do in this draft that I thought that they would was draft a linebacker. I really wanted them to take one. They did not. And Chris Ballard was asked after the draft why they ended up not taking any sorts of linebacker because, EJ Speed is gone. They don't really. They do have other guys. We just aren't very familiar with them. So here's what Chris Ballard had to say about the Colts not selecting a linebacker in the NFL draft this year.
Yeah, it just didn't work out. We got we drafted JC a year ago, who we really like. We thought when he played last year was really good, and we got some other guys on the roster we really like. So we think we will be okay in that area. Now, you got to understand that Lou is a little different than what we've done in the past where we had a Mike, Will, and a Sam. Okay, now we're just playing with a Mike and a Will. All right, so not as many guys are as needed as in the past.
Chris Ballard, Colts GM right there, explaining why the Indianapolis Colts didn't draft a linebacker in the NFL draft. That makes perfect sense. No fluff there. Just, hey, we like the guys we have. We don't need as many because of the defensive system that Lou Anarumo runs. We thought JC, I think that's Jalen Carlies, for those who don't know. We thought that when he played last year, we thought that he looked good. So we didn't feel like we needed to take one, and we didn't think that we should take one given where we drafted. There wasn't anyone on the board worth us picking. It's a fantastic response. It is. Now, if a Jahad Campbell or the guy out of UCLA whose name I'm blanking on, if they had been available with that 45th pick, then I think that we would have seen the Colts go linebacker there. But after they got past those guys, I think they're like, you know what? We're good. We would rather have another edge rusher. We would rather take another corner in the third round. We still need, another offensive tackle. So we're going to take one here in the fourth. It makes sense to me. Every team has priorities. Every team does. They value different positions more than others. Obviously, every team in the NFL values quarterback the highest. But after that, I think you see some variation. Like the New York Giants clearly value edge rushers because they've got 7 of them now. And that they use high quality draft picks on. They use the number 7 pick on Kayvon Thibodeau, 4 years ago. They used a pretty high pick on Dexter Lawrence. They used the number 3 overall pick on Abdul Carter. Teams value positions differently. The Colts clearly do not value the linebacker position as much as they do edge rusher and corner and safety. It's clear, you can see it in the way that they've drafted, and you can see it in the way that they've spent their money in the off seasons. They don't value that position as much as the other ones. And to their credit, they've done a pretty good job at developing guys at that linebacker spot throughout Chris Ballard's time in Indianapolis. Okay, Zaire Franklin was a 7th round pick. EJ Speed was a 5th round pick. And so hopefully this is just another scenario where the Colts took some guy late that you or I didn't really care about, and then we see them start early. Or, this JC comes in and he starts and he's great right off the rip. Hopefully that's what ends up happening. We'll have to wait and see, though. Can't wait. we're, a few weeks out now from training camp. All the players are back, and I hope all these guys are awesome. I hope they all show up. I hope they all start from day one, and they're all Pro Bowlers or all pro selections at some point in their careers while they're playing for the Colts. That is the hope. Whether or not it happens, I really don't know. The Cleveland Browns are the other big story of the NFL draft because they took Shedeur Sanders. Can't wait to talk about. I can't wait to talk with Kevin Potts about this coming up here in like 30 minutes. It's going to be absolutely fantastic to kind of hear his thoughts. But the Colts no longer have the most dysfunctional quarterback room in the NFL. Big thank you to the Cleveland Browns. Okay? The Cleveland Browns now have not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 quarterbacks in their quarterback room. And I know that Mel Kiper Jr. spent all weekend on your TV telling you about Shedeur Sanders a lot. But I have a couple thoughts of my own that I would like to throw out there. First, I wish the Colts had taken Shedeur Sanders over Riley Leonard. I do, because Riley Leonard has zero potential whatsoever to ever be a starter in the NFL. To quote Zach Hicks, friend of the program, he's Anthony Richardson in Daniel Jones's body. That is not good. I don't understand how players like Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe and Tyler Shuck went in front of Shedeur Sanders from a talent perspective. It doesn't matter, though, because this was probably the best thing for him. Every quote that we heard about Shedeur Sanders in this pre-draft process was not good. He didn't interview well. There was something in every quote about how cocky he was or how arrogant he was. I saw another quote over the weekend saying that he clearly didn't care about what teams had to say about him. It's important to be humbled. This will probably do it. I also think that non-NFL teams, so the Mel Kipers of the world, your draft elevators of the world, or evaluators of the world, simply overvalued his talent. NFL teams didn't like his talent, and they probably didn't think he was worth the headache. And the big thing here is the emphasis on the talent, because if you're a headache, teams will still take you early if they think that you're talented. Johnny Manziel was an alcoholic coming out of Texas A&M, and the Browns used the first-round pick on him. There were questions last year about Caleb Williams' character coming out of USC. Still went number 1 overall. NFL teams do not care about your baggage if you're an elite talent. Shedeur Sanders, very simply, is not an elite talent. There's a reason why he went in the 5th round. And it's not a conspiracy. I think it's about his talent. He was sacked 42 times in college football last year. That led the nation. He had a 20% pressure to sack rate ratio. That was the worst among quarterbacks. His time to throw on average was 3 seconds. That ranked 26th worst in all of college football of the 156 quarterbacks that qualified. He holds the ball too long. Okay? Scouts like The Athletic's Nick Baumgardner noted that whenever he leaves the pocket, he leaves backwards, which isn't good. You're supposed to step up in the pocket. Okay? Unlike guys like Cam Ward, who, his time to throw was pretty long at 2.8 seconds, but whenever he would escape, he escaped up, not back. This was also a weak quarterback class. Only 2 guys went in the first round. Okay? There were questions about his arm talent. There were questions about his mobility. There were questions about his pocket processing. He skipped combine drills. His interviews didn't help. Like, a guy with these issues in the pocket, because at the end of the day, you have to win from the pocket at some point in the NFL. A guy with these issues clearly isn't a first-round talent. Okay, Kevin Potts, who's going to join the show here in about 25 minutes. He talked about how he evaluated Shedeur Sanders as a second-round talent. That's what he was. And a second-round talent with all these interview issues doesn't get taken in the second round. If you're a guy who's going to go number 1 overall and you have all these issues, you still probably go number 1 overall. And they say, he'll mature. Not if you're a second-round talent, though, and I'll be very interested to see how he responds this season. I know that Deion Sanders talks a lot, and he's been blamed for some of this, saying that there are only certain teams that he would allow for Shedeur to play for. But Deion Sanders played in the NFL for a long time. He understands what it's like to be in that locker room. And so I expect for him to actually help Shedeur in this, whole NFL journey that he's about to go on. The other thing that I'm very intrigued to see is who are the Browns going to get rid of? They currently have Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Deshaun Watson, and 2 rookies, and Dylan Gabriel, who they used the 3rd-round pick on, and Shedeur Sanders in their quarterback room. Teams don't carry 5 quarterbacks. They carry 3. If I was them, I would cut Deshaun Watson, and I would trade Kenny Pickett because, those guys aren't the answer. Roll with the old man. When you get tired of him throwing, 2 or 3 picks a game, you can then throw in Gabriel or Shedeur, whoever performs better during practice. Okay, so the Browns, look, they've sucked for forever, but they remain interesting. So I'll be monitoring them probably on my own time during the entire NFL season. I'll also be, as of right now, we have the NBA playoffs just rolling. Pacers up 3-1, clearly better than the Milwaukee Bucks. My thoughts on the Pacers 3-1 lead over the Bucks when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you're having a nice week. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on Twitter, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. Maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Oh, man. Pacers-Bucks Game 4 happened last night. Pacers obviously won pretty easily. 4 games into the series now, which means 8 halves of basketball have been played. The Pacers have been the better team in 7 of them. They've gotten whatever shots they've wanted in those 7 halves. For one half of basketball, the Bucks were better than the Pacers. Gary Trent Jr. had to score 18 points in a quarter during that half for it to happen. And, the Bucks, Gary Trent Jr. and Giannis just had to keep going crazy. That was obviously Game 3 on Friday night. Gary Trent Jr. played out of his mind, and the Pacers settled for too many threes in that second half, and it led to a blowout. Last night, we saw the Pacers do what they've done for this entire series, and that's move the ball. They were incredibly well engaged on the defensive end of the floor. Miles Turner did an excellent job protecting the rim. Aaron Nesmith flying around, wreaking havoc. That chase down block on Bobby Portis in the third quarter, insane. Just insane. The effort, the athleticism, just an incredible play. I thought those two guys, Nesmith and Turner, really set the tone for the Pacers early. Offensively, they just made open shots. That's really all it was. Like, even going back to Game 3, in the first half, they went into the break up by 10, and they didn't shoot the ball that well. They just missed open shots repeatedly, and it's really hard to beat good teams when you miss open shots repeatedly, like the Pacers did in that Game 3 on Friday night. Last night, they didn't miss open shots, which is usually what happens. Usually when you give NBA players open shots, they tend to make them. Simple as that. Okay? And Ian Eagle was really driving me crazy last night. Every shot that went in for the Pacers, he was like, oh my gosh, they're on fire. It's like, no, Pacers aren't on fire. They're just getting wide open looks every time down the floor. They weren't hot. They just got a bunch of layups and open threes. That's a beautiful offense. And they ran it all night. Like, what teams want to do in the NBA now in terms of like shot quality, what their shot chart looks like, it is exactly what the Pacers offense looked like last night. They took a bunch of threes. If they weren't taking a three, they got a layup. And it wasn't like, this is, why I get really annoyed when people say that every team plays the same, because it's just not true. Like, the Boston Celtics, their shot chart against the Magic looked very similar to what the Pacers shot chart against the Bucks looked like. But if you watch those two games, the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers looked completely different in terms of how they generated those shots. The Indiana Pacers, and this is why they are just such a joy to watch, they had 36 assists. 36 assists is bonkers. If you have like 28, that's a lot. They had 36. It's incredible. Only 20% of the Indiana Pacers points so far throughout these playoffs, only 20% of their points have come unassisted. The team second close to them is the Denver Nuggets, and they're at 36%. The Pacers move the basketball better than every other team in the playoffs, and it's why they're scoring as many points as they are. And it all starts with Tyrese Halliburton. He was the best player for the Pacers last night. 17 points, 15 assists, and 8 rebounds. It's impressive. He only took 11 shots, which is bothersome. He really bothered me in that first half. The Bucks are so willing to switch because I think that they realize that, like, look, it doesn't matter who we put on this dude. We don't have anyone who can stay in front of him. So Miles Turner or Aaron Nesmith or Andrew Nemhard or whoever would come over and they would set a ball screen. And, Bobby Portis or Kyle Kuzma or, Brooke Lopez or whoever would switch on to him. It's like, oh, you got Bobby Portis one-on-one. You got Brooke Lopez one-on-one. You got Kyle Kuzma one-on-one. Go. And he wouldn't. And it was just really frustrating. But that being said, he wasn't bad. As I said, he was the best player for the Pacers in this game. He had 10 points on 4 of 7 shooting at half. But he could have just done a lot more in the scoring column. He also had 7 assists and 5 rebounds. Once again, those are just his halftime numbers. Like, he played great, but like he could have been better. And when they play Cleveland in the next round, like he's got to be better than what he was. Look, he still played great. They won by 26. So like I can't gripe too much, but like I'm ready for him to go to that next level. Like, that's just kind of what I'm waiting on. Okay. He wasn't the only guy who played well, though. Miles Turner went back to being impactful, really struggled Friday night in game 3, 1 of 9 from the floor. Last night, though, awesome on both ends. Blocking shots. He dunked on Giannis. That was pretty cool. Part of that was he got off to a really good start. 14 points, 5 of 7 shooting in the first half with 2 blocks. Right? He played a really large role in slowing down Giannis the whole night. He finished the game with 23 points on 9 of 13 shooting with 4 blocks. Like, he did everything that the Pacers needed him to do. He was amazing. Led the Pacers in scoring last night with 23 points. I mean, he was awesome. And that version of Miles Turner, the Pacers can undoubtedly win with. Undoubtedly. But as great as he was, Aaron Nesmith was awesome too. I love this guy. Aaron Nesmith is absolutely fearless. He's absolutely fearless. Here's Tyrese Halliburton after the game talking about Aaron Nesmith.
Yeah, I mean, that's who Double A is. I think what he brings doesn't always show up on the score sheet, but some people would say like they're willing to die for this. Double A is willing to die for this. He gives it his all every night. And I think every team in the NBA wants a guy like Aaron Nesmith. Every team who wins big and ultimately wins it all always has a guy like Aaron Nesmith. So love having a guy like that in our group who'll give it all for us. And he was really big for us tonight, and as he has been since he's come back from injury earlier this season, and he'll continue to be the rest of the year.
Tyrese Halliburton right there talking about Double A, which, also known as Aaron Nesmith, and just the importance, and he's willing to die for this. That's a little strong for me, but I get what he's saying. Like, that dude is an insane competitor. Okay, he plays so freaking hard. Okay, and he, game 4 is just the best example of it. He's giving up a tremendous amount of size to Giannis, yet he was able to make things incredibly difficult for him on offense in that first half, along with Miles Turner. Giannis only 8 points on 3 of 10 shooting in the first half for the Bucks. That is by far the best half the Pacers have had defending that guy, because he usually gets, whatever he wants, and that is a testament to Aaron Nesmith and Miles Turner and what they did on the defensive end of the floor. Nesmith also scored the ball really well. Whenever he got AJ Green on him, he just like licked his chops and went to the rim. All 14 of his points came in the first half. He was 5 of 8 from the floor. He didn't really take too many shots in the second half. He only played 25 minutes on the night, but he was great. He was awesome. And he wasn't the only one. Like so many dudes for the Pacers played great. So I can't highlight all of them. Like, all 5 starters got into double figures. They had a total of 8 players in double figures on the night. TJ McConnell was awesome off the bench. Obi Toppin, Jarris Walker, all of them were great. Ben Shepherd only made one shot, only scored 3 points, but I thought that his defense and his effort were incredibly important. Here is Rick Carlisle after the game talking about the impact that their bench had.
The second unit was a big key in the game. Pascal had 4 fouls. We started the team in the fourth quarter without either Ty or Pascal, which we rarely do. And those guys executed. They got good shots. They put points on the board and did a good job defensively. And, when Milwaukee was scoring, we were able to answer back, so that was, very important part of the game. You let these guys get on a run in this building, place just goes crazy. I mean, it's just, it's very loud.
Rick Carlisle right there talking about the impact of the Pacers bench in game 4. And they're a large part of why the Pacers now have a 3-1 lead over the Milwaukee Bucks. The biggest thing in this series, though, is still just the lack of defense from Milwaukee. Pacers scored 100 points in 3 quarters. 100 points in 3 quarters. That's crazy. This is what happens when you make open shots. Unlike game 3. This is what happens when Gary Trent Jr. doesn't have the game of his life. Okay, game 3 was weird. Gary Trent Jr. is not going for 37 again. Okay, and it went back to normal last night. Game 5, I'm pretty sure it's tomorrow night. Let me double check that, though. Game 5, though, the series should be over at that point. Okay, like you can't allow for the Damian Lillard-less Milwaukee Bucks. By the way, feel bad for Damian Lillard to work your way back from blood clots and then tear your Achilles, because that's what it seemed like happened. That's just brutal. I feel bad for him because it's a lot of work to come back from an injury like that. Ridger asking on the Indie Sports Ticket YouTube page chat, if you want to head over there, subscribe. Asking, will they blow up Milwaukee at the end of the year? I don't know if they will. I think they should, because they don't have a future right now. Like, their best young guys, Kevin Porter Jr., who before last night was shooting like 29% from the floor in the first 3 games. I think Giannis is going to want out, so they may be forced to blow it up. If Damian Lillard, he's not going to retire because he's due $113 million in these next 2 seasons. So I promise he's going to rehab. He's going to come back. He's going to get all of his money, and then he will retire. But with Giannis, I think they should trade him. They'll try not to, because he's Giannis, and you can put his, he sells a bunch of jerseys, and you can put his face on your building, and people will show up. But I think they should trade him, because they would get a ton back for him, and he would actually go to a place where he can win. So we'll see what they do. I think the Bucks should blow it up. Will they? I don't know. Teams, unless you're the Dallas Mavericks, tend to not want to part ways with, one of the 4 or 5 best players in the world. Speaking of 4 or 5 best players in the world, I think the Colts drafted 7 of them, or 8 of them, however many picks they had. In the draft over the weekend, Kevin Potts is going to join the show to talk about the NFL draft. We'll do a bunch of stuff on the Colts, but we'll also touch on some of the other stuff that happened as well. Kevin Potts joins the show here in about 4.5 minutes.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on Twitter, _ Jonathan Smith, if you want to follow me there. You can also listen via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And if you want even more from me, go check out the My Take Is YouTube channel. Also, go check out the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. If you have any questions on any player that was drafted, Kevin has got you covered. He joins the show now. What's going on, man? How are you?
Good. Excited to finally those 3 days of the draft. They get a little bit hectic. Enjoy some downtime. Just kind of dig into what these teams, how it's going to affect them next year.
Let's start with the Colts. What were your thoughts on their draft overall?
I was a pretty big of the Colts draft. I ended up giving it an A- draft grades. I think at the top, we've talked about Tyler Spring and how awesome a fit is for in this offense. And I thought their first 5 did a really good job. Maybe we can split some hairs on some ones, but at the end of the day, they are day 3 picks, strong picks at the top, and some dart throws with their next 3, and it was enough to give a grade for me.
Okay, sounds good. So Colts fans, I think, are very familiar with Tyler Warren. Everyone wanted that dude as soon as they found out that he was even an option. But I'm really excited about JT Tuimoloau. Finally said it right. What do Colts fans need to know about him?
He is just rough, man. He is not the type of bendy pass rusher who's probably going to put up 10 sacks in a season. But he's strong. He's very technically sound. I think he's really well opposite Latu on the other, because Latu's more of a finesse rusher than passer. Tuimoloau is going to sit there. He's going to bend the run. He's going to set that edge. And as a pass rusher, he's really strong hands and really long arms. So he's going to squeeze the pocket and push that back into the quarterback. That gives your more pure players more space to work with, because the nowhere to escape. So I don't think it's a sexy pick. I think it's the exact type of edge this kind of lacking. And I believe last time I was on here, the round 2 targets I suggested for them did want one of these bigger edges.
You did. Kevin, you mind hanging up and calling back in? You keep dropping in and out.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Thank you. Kevin is going to call right back in. JT Tuimoloau is this edge rusher out of Ohio State, 12.5 sacks last year, led the Buckeyes. All right, Kevin, let's see if you sound any better here.
How's this sound?
Much better. Yeah, so I'm really excited about JT. I was talking about this earlier, and I may be wrong on this, and if I am, please tell me. So you know how we call the NFL a copycat league because one team does something on offense and all of a sudden everyone else also has to do it?
Yep.
So I don't feel like the same thing happens with the draft. I feel like every team has their own set philosophies on the kinds of players that they want. But the Eagles haven't been bad in forever. And so part of me is why don't teams just do what the Eagles do? And that's draft these very talented guys coming out of really good college programs. That's kind of what the Tuimoloau pick felt like to me. What do you kind of think about that premise of teams not copying other teams in terms of how they draft?
I think there is something to be said about the copy. I think we usually just get it more on a delay in the draft because you have to see teams have results on it. And I don't even know if this pick is actually copying the Eagles. I would more to the Rams and the success they with Jared Verse, and teams leaning more to getting these power rushers on the outside, some more speed on the inside, getting these guys can squeeze the pocket and not let these talented mobile quarterbacks we have anymore and run around. And I think Tuimoloau is that player where even if it's not the flashiest style, his ability to win with power, really condense those pockets and make these mobile guys grow in these confined spaces is something that a lot of teams have success with over the past couple, including the Rams. I think you're seeing teams like the 49ers try and find those type of players in this class.
Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdowns Substack. He does an excellent job covering the NFL Draft. So, Kevin, after the Colts took Tui Moloau, I got a text from my buddy who's a huge Ohio State fan, and his words were, quote, "You just got Cameron Hayward 2.0." That feels a little strong for me. But what is a good comp for JT?
Yeah, Cam Hayward would probably be the highest of the highs when it comes to that. Obviously, that is a thick player. I'm trying to think a good one. I think there is a lot exactly the same position, but Draymond Jones, player who was really good for Denver for a few years, contract for Seattle, didn't really quite live to it, but similar type of players to where he is a big end who you can put him on the edge. He's going to defend the run really well, hold his gap. And then he has the size on pounds that you can slide him inside, put him in the B gap. Similar to Hayward, he's used like that as well. Very dependable, strong, long, patient player who maybe is not a star, but at the end of the year, you realize how many plays he impacts. Counting stats aren't amazing.
Okay. So I think one of the things said about the Colts draft is that in the third round, they reached on Justin Wally. Gotta be honest, I don't know enough about the third round picks in this draft to know whether or not that's true. What are your thoughts on Justin Wally, the cornerback out of Minnesota, and just that pick in general?
Yeah, he's a really fun player. I do think it's really a reach based on where he was projected to go on the board. I like him enough that it really didn't impact my grade. He's actually a guy I didn't even do a full write-up on. The day before the draft, off the recommendation of who was like, "This guy rocks. You have to watch him." A very experienced player, started 42 games at Minnesota outside. He's a good athlete. He's really, really smart. Tremendous ball production. He is a little bit smaller. I think his long-term home might be in the slot, but you play him on the outside. I think he's a very high player. The size might limit the ceiling, but I think you play all corner spots. He gets ball production. He's a willing player. Maybe he's not going to be a superstar. I think the overreaction of him being a mid to late date guy was a little much for him. I thought he was more of a round guy. And looking at the cornerback at that point of time when he went off, there really wasn't the other guy that I thought would have been a home run pick in the round. So even if he didn't exactly where people projected, I didn't view it as the breach at that point.
Okay. Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. Make sure you go check out his stuff if you have questions about any player. I think a lot of people had questions about Shooter Sanders, who you had rated as a second-round talent. Were you surprised that he slid to the fifth round?
I mean, there was really no indications of it. I did think he was a second rounder. I thought first a little bit rich, but everything we heard the draft was still, even if he was going to have a little bit of a slot we originally anticipated, he would still probably be a first rounder, early second rounder. And there was rumors about interview issues and not having the best process, no indication that it would lead to this. Surprise in that aspect. When you or why he fell, I think that is a little less. There's only a couple teams looking for starters in this class, and the teams like the Saints and the Giants that needed one decided they like Dart and Shuck more. I don't personally, but I think it is close enough that I understand why I take those guys. And then after that, when you're looking as a backup, he doesn't have the traits of a guy like Jalen Monroe where you think you're developing superstar ceiling. And fortunately for him, part of this is his fault and part of it is the media. There's a circus that comes with drafting him. And when you backup quarterback, do you want all of that stuff coming with him? And part of the cycle of him slipping makes it even more story and actually snowballs that effect or takes him, has this big story surrounding him. I do think he ended up in a nice spot in Cleveland, but as you can already tell, there was a lot of drama around picked where he was picked. And I just don't think a lot wanted to deal with that for a backup quarterback.
The Browns have 5 quarterbacks on their roster, which is just, it's too many. Who do they trade / cut?
I mean, I would that one of either Dylan Gabriel or Kenny Pickett doesn't make it out of camp. Hope it's probably Pickett because you spent a 3rd-round pick for some reason on Dylan Gabriel. But those are the two guys where they are the low ceiling guys who have great character that you would assume would be a back. I don't think you're going to carry 2 of them. I would assume Flacco's going to stay because you want the veteran experience. I'm going to Sanders make the roster because I think he's actually the best quarterback at room, even with everything going on. And part of the pick being traded up for in the 5th round does feel like an ownership missive. Hey, this guy can't fall any longer. Go. Watson, I think they're stuck with him just for reasons, so they can't get rid of him, which is why I think Pickett and are the 2 easiest to get rid of, financial and media perspective.
Okay, that makes sense. Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack, talking about the draft that happened over the weekend. What was the most puzzling pick of the draft for you?
Puzzling pick, and I think just kind of class overall, necessarily in a bad way, is the Chicago Bears. Because it was a team, I think a lot of us expected them to get Ashton Jeanty early, get maybe some offensive line help. And the first couple didn't really go with that. I really liked the Colts and Loveland pick. He's a perfect fit for them. But their second was Luther Burden III out of Missouri. A fantastic player and probably should have gone a little bit early. But he has a lot of the similar as DJ Moore does, already on the team and is already highly paid. And now have a room of Colson Loveland, Luther Burden, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have all that targets. I'm a little confused how this is all going to work out. Who's getting what targets? Who's filling what roles? Is DJ potentially up for trade with the new coaching staff? While I like the players involved in their draft, I'm certain what their final roster is going to look like. And I'm very curious to see how that goes this summer.
What was your favorite move in the draft? It doesn't necessarily have to be a pick. Maybe a team traded down and they still got a guy that was good and they got another guy that was good. Who was what was your favorite move?
For me, the trade the Los Angeles Rams had with the Falcons, getting a 1st-round pick to move from the late first, mid 40s in this class is insane that was even offered to them. All spring we talked about how this is not a very good class. The difference between pick 15 and pick 50 isn't really that big. If you have the opportunity to move and get extra picks, absolutely do so. And for them to get a future first, a pick after Houston traded out to basically spot for only 2/3, I thought was a massive deal. And even who they took in the draft this year, the fact that this team with an aging Matthews staff now has 2 first-round picks, particularly one from Atlanta, that has not shown any consistency that pick to be a late one, means they have really good capital, what presumably is going to be a better quarterback. To go up and get that player, I thought was just a fantastic move on day one.
Joined by Kevin Potts, writer of the Kevin Potts NFL and NFL Draft Breakdown Substack. Last 2 for you right here. Who had your favorite draft and who had your least favorite draft?
My favorite draft, unfortunately for the rest of the league, was the Kansas City Chiefs. Good teams, just stay good. Thought getting Josh Simmons at pick 32 he was my number 1 tackle in the class, top 10 player on my board. He fell obviously because of injury, but I still, assuming his knee's fine, that this is a tackle and probably got a franchise one. And then basically all their other picks, I think, are players that you'd be in year one or contributors. They got a couple different linemen with different skill sets that they can slide in. And Royals in the 4th round, I thought he was a 2nd-round player. A Rasheed Rice to his game. And Brashad Smith, 7th-round pick out of SMU, is an explosive receiver. And I just think that they checked a lot of needs and boxes. And the fact that you could get starter role players out of your picks is really impressive. The least favorite draft was unfortunately the Cincinnati, because they're a team that absolutely has to, because they do not have spending power, so they're not approved through free agency. I didn't mind their first pick. I think Stewart is a good player. I think their athleticism offside of Hendrickson stays there is better than what they had. I think Taj Brooks day 3 back. But for a team that only had 6 picks, they didn't really move around. They drafted 2 older, undersized linebackers in the second and the fourth, bunch of other needs. And then they drafted a guard in Darryl Fairchild, the third, who's fine, but I thought there was better players on the board. So I'm looking at a split edge who's an athletic project and a decent back in a draft where they really need probably multiple starters. It just really didn't do it for me.
Okay, that makes sense. Kevin, thanks for your time. As always, I'm sure we'll continue to have you on throughout the college football season. Jeez, man, this is just a brutal day for me today, Kevin. I'm sure we'll have you on again here soon, man. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course, always a pleasure.
That is Kevin Potts. You can check him out on Twitter at KPotts06. Does a really good job covering the NFL draft. Make sure you check out his Substack as well. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, the Indianapolis Colts selected a lot of players. Are they good? Are they bad? Kevin seems to like them. I do as well. I will tell you why I like this Colts draft when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
fits in today's sports world. It's here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Hopefully you enjoyed the Colts draft. Hopefully you enjoyed Pacers Bucks. No matter how you're tuning in, I greatly appreciate it, whether it's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe you're watching on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith. You can also listen via the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. And if you want even more from me, go check out the My Take Is YouTube page. Now, you should also go check out Indulge Indy. $45 a day would be a great gift for Mother's Day. It would be. Okay, if you're looking to have fun, to drink, eat, socialize, Indulge Indy, it is 1,000% for you. Come out to the Ritz Charles in Carmel Saturday, May 10th, to have endless samples of wine, spirits, and ready-to-drink cocktails and sample charcuterie board type foods and chocolates. I'm telling you, if you want a fun afternoon, Saturday, May 10th, the Ritz Charles, only $45. Text Indulge to 317-228-1430 to get a text back to buy tickets. Now, Colts draft. We're locked, loaded, and ready to go on it, baby. I like the draft. I thought it was a good one. I definitely thought it could have been much worse than what it was. Okay, the Colts ended up obviously taking Tyler Warren with that 14th pick. JT Tuimoloau in the second round. Justin Wally in the third. Offensive tackle Jalen Travis in the fourth. DJ Giddens in the fifth. Riley Leonard in the sixth. Tim Smith in the sixth. And then safety Hunter Wohler in the seventh. Here is Chris Ballard, giving his thoughts on this year's draft class as a whole.
But I was trying to figure, okay, there's certain things we wanted to get done, and we had to be able to move back and get a little luck, which we were able to. But all productive, all really mature players and men with an element of toughness and maturity that we wanted to add. So excited about that.
Chris Ballard right there talking about the NFL draft and how they added some toughness and some maturity. Important things. Very, very important things. The Tyler Warren pick, it's everyone's favorite pick, right? He fell in the Colts' lap. They got lucky, all that good stuff. Right? That's a guy that everyone associated with the Colts, whether it's, inside of that facility or it's the fans on the outside, they have been clamoring for that guy from the moment that he entered the NFL draft. He's not only your favorite pick, probably. He may not be your favorite pick. If he's not, let me know. Head over to YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, join the live stream, and comment who your favorite pick was. But he's most definitely Shane Steichen's favorite pick. Listen to the Colts head coach talk about Tyler Warren.
He's a guy, that can do it all. I mean, you guys know that. He can catch, he can run, he can throw. I mean, we might play him on defense. I don't know. The thing that's crazy, they talk about the Riggins, him growing up watching him. I mean, that's how he freaking plays. When he's got the ball in his hands, this guy is physical, run after catch. He'll lay the wood on you. He'll hurt you. It's going to bring a lot to our football team for sure. I mean, you got a target that big with that size. He plays above the rim. You know what I mean? Sometimes when guys are on him, he's still open. I mean, I know when we were at the Chargers, just an example. I'm not saying we're here yet, but we had a Gates rule. It was like, hey, you got him one-on-one, you throw him the dang ball. So obviously it'll be exciting to, see when he gets in here and see him compete. It'll be fun.
Shane Steichen right there talking about our new guy, Tyler Warren. Hopefully he is as good as what everyone thinks that he is going to be. Well, let's wait and see. I'm very intrigued. I hope that the Colts are able to use him the way that they clearly want to. Hopefully they're able to get him the ball in space, and hopefully we'll see. But I think everyone loves that pick. I personally really like the JT Tuimoloau pick. Dominant edge rusher at Ohio State. Everyone talked about Jack Sawyer while he was there, but Tuimoloau was their best pass rusher. He led them in sacks with 12.5. He also had 61 tackles. That was the most of all of the Ohio State defensive linemen. After the draft, or as soon as the pick went through, my buddy, Zach Gray, who's on the show pretty much every Friday, shot me a text and said, you just got Cam Hayward 2.0. Cam Hayward has had a stellar career for the Steelers. Okay, that's high praise, but I like the energy. And more importantly, I like the pick. The NFL is a copycat league. Teams look around the NFL, they see what other offenses are running, and they copy it. That's how the evolution of the NFL happens, right? So when the offenses change, the defenses change. After the defenses change, the players that teams draft then begin to change as well. But in terms of copying other teams and how they draft, that's not a thing that happens as often. Now, obviously, the way that you run your offense and your defense as schemes change impact who you draft. Like, Lamar Jackson, part of why he was a first-round pick is because he was drafted kind of during the time where teams were shifting into that we want a mobile quarterback phase that we're in now. 20 years ago, probably not a first-round pick because he wasn't very good in the pocket coming out of Louisville. But in terms of copying philosophies, I think every team should just do what the Eagles do. And that's take great players from great programs that produced. Like, that is the blueprint for the Eagles. And they found a lot of success with that blueprint. Like, when was the last time the Eagles were bad? Couldn't tell you. Taking JT Tuimoloau feels like a pick that the Eagles would make. This is a player who had a ton of production at a big-time school that expects to win. This guy is clearly talented. He was a top 50 pick. He was the best defensive lineman on a team that won a national title last year. Okay? Like that's really impressive. Like, those are the kind of guys that you want on your team. And another thing that I like about this pick is they drafted a dude that's used to winning. Everyone in the NFL wants to win. But there's a difference when you expect to win. Okay? Like, losing bothers you more when you're used to winning. It just does. People that are numb to losing or used to losing are just elated when they win. And that's cool. Like, you should be excited when you win. That's not what I want. I want for after the Colts win games to just walk in the locker room like nothing happened. Like, you know what? Like this was supposed to happen. Teams that get like overjoyed whenever they win, it's probably a losing team. Unless, you win like a playoff game or you win, the Super Bowl or whatever. But if it's just a normal like week 7 game, I don't need you beaming when you're walking off the sideline. I need you to be like, all right, this is normal. And then when you lose, I need you to have a big scowl on your face. Because when you expect to win, losing bothers you more. And people who expect to win have a tendency to work a little bit harder when they do lose. Whereas guys that are used to losing are a little more chill. Simple as that. I like that the Colts took Tim Smith, who played at Alabama, which means that he's really talented. Also means that he expects to win whenever he plays. I like that Riley Leonard won a lot of games in college. Even though he can't really throw the ball, he won a lot of games. It's great. You need people in your building that expect to win. That's part of why the Cam Bynum and the Travarius Ward signings in free agency, that's part of why I like them. Cam Bynum won 14 games in Minnesota last year. It's pretty good. I like guys that win 14 games, and those are the kind of players that when they leave, like, they expect to continue to win. Travarius Ward got to not one but 2 Super Bowls with the 49ers. That is a guy who's going to show up and he expects to win. You need dudes like that in your locker room. You absolutely have to have those kind of guys if you want to win football games in the NFL. If you want to win anything, anywhere, you have to have people that not only want to win, but you have to have people that expect to win. Top to bottom, I thought the Colts had a very solid draft. I thought that the Tyler Warren pick, like, that's a big talent that addressed a need. It's a guy who they're hopefully going to be able to plug into their offense, and he's going to be great from week 1. Okay, I heard Gronk say that he was going to be the Brock Bowers of this year's NFL draft. Obviously a little different because they're not the same kind of player, but when Rob Gronkowski says, "Hey, this dude's awesome," I'm going to take his word for it. Okay. So on the rest of throughout the rest of the draft, though, I think it looks good. They address needs throughout the draft. So on paper, this appears to be a good draft. No one knows, though. Keep seeing people say that the Colts reached on Justin Wally, their 3rd-round pick. You don't know. You have no idea. Okay? So we're going to find out, though, here in a few weeks, whether or not these guys can play. Because, rookie camp's really not that far away. And it's not really hard to tell who can play and who can't. It's really easy. NFL athletes, you can just tell. They're just elite. Whenever you're sitting around and you're watching, training camp and you've got Alec Pierce, who's 6'3" and runs a 4.4 or whatever. If Justin Wally can't guard that guy, then he's probably not going to play in the NFL. And then sure, they probably reached. Right? But jumping to these conclusions this early, I just think is absolutely insane. It is insane. Okay. The Colts, another thing that I like about their draft, I feel like they have a new draft philosophy. Okay. The Colts, obviously have different philosophies with every draft that they have. Some of those guys, they want these big athletes. That's a pretty normal thing. They want guys who test well and all that kind of stuff. An adjustment, though, the Colts only drafted players that transferred up in competition or guys who didn't transfer at all. I don't mind that. I like the idea of taking guys that are loyal and guys that are okay with waiting their turn and are cool with working their butts off until their turn comes. Because it's very common to have to wait your turn in the NFL. If you're not a 1st or 2nd round pick, probably not going to start week 1 of your rookie season. You're probably going to have to learn how to play special teams at some point, in case that is your path to staying in the NFL. And I think this is the A.D. Mitchell rule. He got playing time at Georgia the first 2 years he was there. Then he transferred to Texas, played there 1 year. Then he got drafted. Didn't go well for him last year. And he had some non-inspiring quotes. He was upset after he got drafted in the 2nd round. He got on there, was like, I'm mad. I was like, all right, man, that's cool. He didn't mind throwing a game-changing pick 6 against the Denver Broncos because he, quote, did his job. People overreact to things all the time. If this is a new Colts draft philosophy, maybe this is just something that happened and the Colts didn't plan for this to happen. But if it is, I am a big fan of it, and I think a lot of it is going to have to do with the experience that they had with A.D. Mitchell last season. He didn't play a lot. Based on what we know about him, he probably didn't handle it very well. Whereas guys who didn't transfer or maybe got recruited to a lower level school and had to work their way up, those guys are probably going to be a little more understanding if they don't start immediately in the NFL. And even if they don't understand it, the fact that they were able to stay in college, work their butts off, and not leave, I think says something to their character and to their willingness to earn their way onto the field. Okay, the one thing that the Colts didn't do with their draft this year that I didn't like was they didn't draft a linebacker. Okay, I didn't get it. I was a little annoyed by it. But Chris Ballard was asked why they didn't draft a linebacker. He explained it beautifully, and now I'm kind of okay with it. Here's Chris Ballard explaining why the Colts didn't take a linebacker in this draft.
Yeah, it just didn't work out. We got we drafted JC a year ago, who we really like. We thought when he played last year was really good. And we got some other guys on the roster we really like. So we think we will be okay in that area. Now, you got to understand that Lou is a little different than what we've done in the past where we had a Mike, Will, and a Sam. Okay, now we're just playing with a Mike and a Will. All right, so not as many guys are as needed as in the past.
Chris Ballard right there breaking down why the Colts chose to not take a linebacker. First and foremost, they like Jalen Carlisle's, or however you say his name, Carly's, whatever it is, JC, as Chris Ballard called him. Look, to the Colts' credit, they've done a really good job of developing linebackers. The really interesting thing is what he said about Lou and Arumo in this new system. He's like, you don't need as many linebackers. So if you don't need as many, you don't need to draft one. That makes sense to me. Okay, whether or not the young guys on the roster that we haven't seen play yet, whether or not they're any good, no clue. I hope Chris Ballard's right because I want this Colts team to be good. I would like to watch Wild Card Weekend with something on the line, but we'll see. We'll see. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Pacers-Bucks game 4. The Pacers have a 3-1 lead, and they will hopefully wrap up the series tomorrow night back at Gamers Fieldhouse. Pacers-Bucks when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
And I don't blame them. They took them off, and they took them.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. Colts draft, Pacers basketball. What more could you ask for This is the fun part of the football season where we don't have to realize that the Colts are going to be bad again. We can be all hopeful and stuff. It's great. It's also the time of the year where the Indiana Pacers win playoff games. They're up 3-1 now on the Milwaukee Bucks. Of the 8 halves of basketball that have been played so far in this series, the Pacers have been the better team in 7 of them. They've gotten whatever shots they've wanted in those 7 halves. And for one half of basketball, the Bucks looked great. But it required an 18 points Gary Trent Jr. third quarter to make that happen. Giannis also had to drop 37 in that game. And so did Gary Trent Jr. He just had the game of his life. And that's what it took for the Bucks to beat the Pacers. Okay, what we saw last night was a much better reflection of what this series has been. Friday night, Gary Trent Jr. in Game 3 played out of his mind, just went bonkers. 9 of 12 from 3. You knew that wasn't going to happen again. And while he was going bonkers from 3, the Pacers saw that deficit growing more and more, and they settled for too many threes. They tried to shoot their way back into it, and sometimes that works, but sometimes it also doesn't. The Pacers run a beautiful, beautiful system. They abandoned it, and they got blown out, in part because of that. Last night, though, we saw the Pacers move the ball a lot more. Ball's popping, ball movement and body movement. That's what they had. And it was beautiful offense because of it. They were also incredibly engaged on the defensive end of the floor. Miles Turner doing his thing, protecting the rim, 4 blocks, making it tough on Giannis. Aaron Nesmith flying around, wreaking havoc. By the way, that chase down block on Bobby Portis, crazy. Those 2 guys set the tone defensively very early in that game. And then offensively, they just made open shots. Ian Eagle was freaking out about the Pacers being hot offensively. But they should have been. Every time the Pacers made a shot, Ian Eagle, they just can't miss. Being Ian Eagle, which I greatly appreciate, but I do wish that Ian Eagle would have realized what was happening, and that's that the Indiana Pacers got a bunch of open layups and open threes. That's a beautiful offense. Like, if you were to break down shot charts of what teams want in the NBA, it would have looked very similar to what the Indiana Pacers did last night. All of their shots either came from inside the paint or it was a 3. Open 3, to be a little more specific. And they ran that offense all night, and they got the shots that they wanted all night. And it led to the team having 36 assists. That's an incredibly high number. And that starts with Tyrese Halliburton and his willingness to give the basketball up. Because if you're playing with Tyrese Halliburton, that if I give the ball up and if I get open again, I'm going to get it back, which is such an important thing when it comes to playing alongside another star. Tyrese Halliburton, guys must love playing with that dude because of how unselfish he is in giving up the basketball. I wish he'd be a little more selfish. And I'm about to talk about that. But that willingness to pass the ball, it is an infectious thing that clearly impacts everyone else that is on the floor with him. The Indiana Pacers have the lowest percentage of points created without an assist in the NBA playoffs. Only 20% of their points have come unassisted. That is by far the lowest mark. The second lowest mark is the Denver Nuggets, who are at 36%. So in other words, 80% of the Indiana Pacers points have come off of assists this series against the Bucks. And once again, it all starts with Halliburton. He was their best player last night. 17 points, 15 assists. Let's go. 8 rebounds. That is a great game from Tyrese Halliburton. He only took 11 shots. He was 6 of 11 from the field. It bothers me because he's such a good scorer. I've ranted about this so many times. But I just wish he would attack more whenever he gets a switch. Too many times in the first half, he got Bobby Portis or Brook Lopez or Kyle Kuzma on him. And he didn't go at them. And those are 3 guys that Tyrese Halliburton can beat off the bounce. Simple as that. He can beat those 3 guys off the bounce whenever he wants. We've seen him do it repeatedly in this series. And he would get to the rim sometimes, and he'd pass the ball up. It's like, nah, man, like, you're at the rim, just lay it in. It's right there. Like, he wasn't bad. Like I said, he was the best player on the floor for the Pacers last night. He was the best player in that first half last night because Giannis struggled. More on that here in a minute. But he could have been better. He could have been better. And they're going to need him to be when they play Cleveland in the second round because you got to score points if you want to beat Cleveland. They are the best offensive team in the NBA. So again, Tyrese Haliburton played great. Pacers got a 26-point win. That's awesome. It's important. But he could have been better. He could have been better. Miles Turner was also great last night. Very impactful. 1 of 9 from the floor in game 3. He was awesome on both ends of the floor. He's blocking shots. He dunked on Giannis. That was awesome. Came off my couch. I don't ever get off my couch when I'm watching basketball. If that happened, though, I stood up very quickly. He got off to a really good start. 14 points on 5 of 7 shooting in the first half. 2 blocks. Right, he was a large part of slowing down Giannis the whole night. He finished the game, Miles Turner did, with 23 points on 9 of 13 shooting, and he had 4 blocks. Like, that is what the Pacers need from him. They need him to score efficiently. He didn't take a ton of threes last night. They need him to score efficiently, and they need him to protect the rim. That is what he did. That is what he did. I get it. He didn't rebound great. He only had 5 rebounds, but Siakam's a good rebounder. Halliburton's a pretty solid guard rebounder. Aaron Nesmith rebounds really well. Jarris Walker, when he comes in off the bench, he's a good rebounder. Like, they don't need Miles Turner to grab 15 rebounds. I'd like for the number to be like 7 or 8, but still, like they have enough rebounding around him that it's fine if he goes out of the game sometimes and he only has like 5 boards. Okay, also didn't play as many minutes as normal last night because the Pacers just whoosh, the Bucks all night long. The other guy that really jumped off the screen last night, I thought, was Aaron Nesmith. Dude's just fearless. Absolutely fearless. Love this dude. One of the best competitors in the NBA. Tyrese Haliburton had quite the quote on Aaron Nesmith after the game last night. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, I mean, that's who Double A is. I think what he brings doesn't always show up on the score sheet, but there's some people who say like they're willing to die for this. Double A is willing to die for this. He gives it his all every night, and I think every team in the NBA wants a guy like Aaron Nesmith. Every team who wins big and ultimately wins it all always has a guy like Aaron Nesmith. So love having a guy like that in our group who'll give it all for us. And he was really big for us tonight, and as he has been since he's come back from injury earlier this season, and he'll continue to be the rest of the year.
Tyrese Haliburton right there talking about Aaron Nesmith and just the impact that he has and just the competitor that he is. The chase down block on Bobby Portis, that's going to live in my mind for forever. Like that was just an incredible play. He gave up so much size to Giannis throughout that game, and he just competed, man. And that's really what you want. Like, you want guys who will just get in a stance and just guard no matter what. And that is what he does. He does exactly what's asked of him on offense, and that's make open threes and attack closeouts. He does those 2 things very well. 14 points on 5 of 8 shooting from the floor. He went at AJ Green every time. He ended up defending him. All 14 of Aaron Nesmith's points came in that first half, but the biggest impact he had was on defense. Giannis, only 8 points on 3 of 10 shooting in that first half. A lot of that had to do with Aaron Nesmith and what he did defensively, just making things hard on him. Okay? So many players played great for the Indiana Pacers last night. And part of that is just shooting. When everyone is making shots, like, it's a little easier to be like, yeah, they played great. It makes it easier. Like, my boy, Jarris Walker, we're not giving up hope. By the way, he's been pretty good in the minutes that he's gotten. Like, he hit four threes last night. Very easy to be like, yeah, he was great. And that was really everybody. The Pacers shot 60% from the field. He shot 46% from 3. They were 18 of 39. And It makes sense. Like this should happen when you have NBA players that get as many open looks as the Pacers did last night. Like, you should shoot the ball extremely well like the Pacers did. And when you move the ball like that, a lot of guys get involved. 5 starters got into double figures for the Indiana Pacers. They had 3 guys off their bench. That means 8 total guys, 8 total dudes got into double figures last night. TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, and Jarris Walker, the first 3 guys off the bench for the Pacers last night. All 3 of them played really well. I thought Ben Shepherd off the bench was good too. He didn't score a ton. He was only 1 of 4 from the field for 3 points, but the effort and the energy that he provided was really important for the Pacers. Here is Rick Carlisle after the game talking about the Pacers bench and their impact.
The second unit was a big key in the game. Pascal had 4 fouls. We started the team in the fourth quarter without either Ty or Pascal, which we rarely do. And those guys executed. They got good shots. They put points on the board and did a good job defensively. And, when Milwaukee was scoring, we were able to answer back, so that was, very important part of the game. You let these guys get on a run in this building, place just goes crazy. I mean, it's just, it's very loud.
But Carlisle right there talking about the bench unit for the Pacers last night and how great they were. And they were. Like, the depth of the Pacers is so obvious, especially when you watch like the Lakers, who played 5 guys the entire second half. They didn't make a sub. You watch the Knicks. They have like 6 guys that can play like real playoff minutes. You watch, so let me see, who else is really thin? I'm blanking on them right now, but those are 2 great examples. And the Pacers aren't like that. Like, they've got 8, 9. They played 10 guys in the first quarter yesterday. Crazy. Insane. With that being said, this series is over. Damian Lillard seems like he tore his Achilles. Here is Tyrese Halliburton talking about Damian Lillard and how his absence is going to impact the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think we got to do, a good job of still continuing to approach these games the right way. I think we also understand that with him being out, other guys are going to step up. KPJ shot 17 shots today. We anticipate him being very aggressive, with a guy like Dame going out, that opens up a lot of shots for them, for other guys on their team. So, we got to be able to scramble, got to be able to, continue to bring our energy for 48 minutes. But it's really unfortunate, to see that happen. Hate to see that happen to anybody.
You're not going to sleepwalk in a closeout game and win. Tyrese Halliburton right there talking about how Lillard going out impacts the rest of the series. But if they just show up and they're focused, they'll win game 5. Also, Lillard going out doesn't impact the series that much. He clearly wasn't himself. He didn't play well. Game 2, he only scored 14 points, was 3 of 14 shooting. He did have 7 assists, though. He was a bad defender in that game. Game 3, 7 points on 2 of 12 shooting with 5 assists while continuing to be a bad defender. Like, his minutes didn't change the series. And, like, they weren't going to. Like, the dude hadn't played basketball in a month. He was either going to be unconscious or he was going to struggle. And he struggled because that's just kind of what happens to guys. It seems like he tore his Achilles. If I was the Bucks, I would grab some TNT and I would blow it up because they don't have any sort of future right now. Trade Giannis, get back a whole bunch of picks, and start rebuilding for the future. That's going to do it here on The Real Jonathan Smith Show. I'll be back tomorrow 10 to noon to continue to discuss the Colts NFL draft. We'll talk Pacers and Bucks game 5 tomorrow night, or tomorrow as well, because they play tomorrow night. Thank you again for watching. If you want more from me, head over to the My Take Is YouTube channel, subscribe, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way next.